I think we'll get started, everybody. Looks like everyone's on the line, so welcome to our water quality volunteer training. I know this would be way more fun in person, but we'll do the best we can today. So my name is Deborah Martin Downs. I am the president of the Muskoka Lakes Association, and I'm also a director on the board of the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association, also known as FOCA. I am a second generation cottager on Lake Muskoka. And I'm also an aquatic ecologist. And although my fieldwork days are long over, I began my training in water sampling in lakes in northern Quebec, where I too learned how to lean over a boat without falling in. In those days, in the mid-1970s, we were looking at experiments to add phosphorus to an isolated bay and see what the response was in water quality and zooplankton, because we were still learning about those dynamics back in the mid-70s. I was just a university student helping out a PhD student, but I learned the importance of careful sampling so that our data could be relied upon, both for the science and for others to use for their research. So today you'll be reminded, for those of you who are returning to sample your sites or learn for the new volunteers, the importance of following the methods and protocols so that the data you collect is accurate and reliable. And when you take these samples, you're making a piece of history. Our data points will be used to tell the story of change in the lakes, for better and for worse, now and into the future. Our results have triggered investigations into suspicious areas that have resulted in actions to remove a problem. So never think that this doesn't make a difference. Our data helps us ensure that the lakes remain swimmable and drinkable and fishable. And before I sign off, I'd like to thank our environment team of Chris Craig, Jan Getson, Eleanor Lewis, Sam Davio, and Stephen Sims for all their hard work in moving to this new format. I'd also like to thank and recognize our hardworking staff, Katie Edwards and Christine Gilmore, without whom this program would be hard-pressed to operate. And I want to thank all of you, our volunteers, because without you, it definitely doesn't operate. We've had to do things differently this year, but I thank you all for working with us to make the sampling happen so that we don't lose another year in our data set and that we can continue to keep our lakes great. And with that, I'll turn the floor back to Chris Craig.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to have you all here. I wish I could see you all in the meeting room in Port Carling like we usually do, but unfortunately, COVID won't allow that just yet. We're delighted to be able to start our program again this year, albeit with some cautions in place for sampler safety and staff safety. So I'm going to lead you through a bit of what our past results have looked like, a little bit about what we're going to do new this year, and then we're going to move into a training video that Jan and Sam and Eleanor have worked very hard to put together for you. Before we get into that, if you have with you the quick sampling guide, that's a good place to take notes. Otherwise, this whole session is going to be recorded and will be available on the website afterwards, so you can review it. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago, we had a record flood. Does anybody remember that, or is that a dim memory? Fortunately, this year and last year, water levels have been pretty benign, and so our ability to boat are not being constrained by water levels, but they are at this point constrained by your ability to get your boat, whatever coaching zone. 2019, we had over 100 volunteers sampling for us. I think it was close to 140. So thank you all. You are making a difference. We did 180 sites. We did 55 areas. And we had 10 affiliate lakes participating, a lot of tests. Please turn to the next slide. In fact, we had over 440 phosphorus tests, 280 bacteria tests, 230 Secchi measurements, and a few ancillary tests. Next, please. And that's where our testing in all those separate places. And we're close to the same complement for this year. Next, please. So why are we testing? We generally test phosphorus concentrations, and we do that at deep sites for long-term trends. The long-term trends are used to identify sites in the district's official plan where we may want to consider limiting development. We also do nearshore sites for phosphorus to look for potential sources that we may rely on or bring to the attention of authorities to have redressed. And those kind of sites may be such things as golf courses, they may be sewage systems, or they may be other sources of nutrients, lawns, or natural sources. We measure water clarity with the Secchi test and water temperature to help explain unexpected results and determine trends. We monitor bacteria, both total coliform and E. coli, in recreational areas to see if we have some chronically elevated things, which may be malfunctioning sewage systems, or something as benign as a beaver dam or too many Canada geese. Is to keep an eye out for algae blooms. We're not the primary responder for algae blooms. The Ministry of Environment, Conservation, Parks is the prime responder. They need to be contacted by their skills action line. And if a bloom is confirmed to be blue-green algae, then the Simcoe Muskoka Health Department becomes part of the response and the ongoing treatment. Next, please. So the MLA takes all the information that we receive and does a kind of stoplight report card. This slide, which you can look at in more detail later, rates sites as green, acceptable, yellow, caution, or red, unacceptable, where the unacceptable would be for phosphorus reading of more than 20 over 5 years. Bacteria, a reading of more than 200, a geometric mean of 5 samples, and this is the health department's guidance. And algae, a bloom that is current year and has a toxic component. Fortunately, next please. In our most recent testing, we had nothing in the red. We had one site with phosphorus increasing over 3 years, a few other sites where there was elevated phosphorus on the particular year, but nothing on the long term. We had a couple of sites in Manette and Walker's Point where we had moderately elevated E. coli, but nothing approaching the health department's guidance. So again, only a yellow. And we had quite a number of past or at that time current blue-green algae observations, but none of these were toxic. So that continues to be a growing source of our business, and we're going to ask you, as part of your testing, to keep an eye out for blue-green algae. Next, please. So overall, the water quality through the lakes is good. We have very few preliminary or yellow concerns from total phosphorus from E. coli, and the program is working to preserve recreational water quality. I will at this point do a little apology because I seem to have a case of hiccups this morning, and that's affecting my speech somewhat. So following my portion, you'll have a video on testing. And just before we get into that, I'm going to draw your attention to some of the changes for this year. The obvious one, COVID-19, we need to be careful, even though quite a number of us are vaccinated at this point. Not too many people are fully vaccinated, and certainly our youthful staff are not vaccinated at all at this point. So we need to be respectful and look after the health of others as well as ourselves. I'll also say that the province seems to be changing its guidance regularly, so I can't foresee that, but they provided last Thursday a guide on how things are going to change over the next few weeks, and we just kind of need to keep up with that. Last time that we tested, we changed testing labs, and our most recent lab, AS in Toronto, is the one that we're still using. They supply us with brown bottles for the phosphorus samples. These bottles are pre-treated, and they contain a preservative. So as a reminder, we do not rinse these bottles. Remember, years ago, we used to have test tubes, and those required rinsing, and we don't use those anymore. We're into the brown bottle routine, and they do not get any rinsing. This year, as a change to what we have done traditionally, is for the deep water test sample collection, we're going to try and take a uniform sample over the depth from the surface to the Secchi depth. That means that you have to kind of do a little practice filling of your collection bottle. It takes roughly 12 seconds for that to fill. So once you have your Secchi depth, let's say, for example, it's a couple of meters, then to get a uniform sample from the surface to the 2 meter depth, you would time your lowering of the bottle to get to 2 meters in 12 seconds. Now, you can double check that with your own bottle, and I'm going to suggest that you do a practice run to get an idea just how fast or slow it takes to your Secchi depth. Now, I know some people on the call will have deeper or shallower Secchi depths, and you're going to have to speed up or slow down your rate of lowering the sample bottle accordingly. Algae, please keep your eye out for blooms, particularly blooms, and we will be posting a guide on algae identification to assist you. The MLA now has its own fluorometry testing equipment, and we will be doing some ad hoc testing at locations that you identify. We are also a partner in the Muskoka Watershed Council's pilot program for algae testing, along with 3 Mile Lake, Leonard Lake, Grandy Lake, and Peninsula Lake, developing the protocols for sampling and for identification and testing. Nevertheless, the prime response for this remains with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and the Central Muskoka District Council. And finally, it's been a couple of years. We're going to ask that everybody update their photos of their sites. And if you don't have a GPS coordinate for your site location, please take it and provide it along with your notes, hopefully from your first sampling date. Thank you. Next, please. So I'm going to join Deb in thanking everybody for participating, particularly during these difficult times, to our Environment Committee, and particularly Jan, Sam, Eleanor, for putting together the new training materials and the video. You will note that we have new staff. Our General Manager, Katie Edwards, Chief of Water Quality Assistant in the office is Christine Gilmore. And I want to thank them for putting the kits together, for running this meeting and trying to organize all the stuff that we change on a daily basis. So thank you all very much. It wouldn't happen without you. So now I think we will move on to our video. And if you have questions during the year, contact Christine at the office. She will do her best to answer. Chelsea, who was our office person before, is on maternity leave, but is available to assist. And if they need further assistance, I'm available to provide. So remember the office number and call if you've got a question. So we'll now move on to our training video. And unless there are a couple of questions that you may have right now. No questions right now, so we'll hold those till the end. And we'll move directly into the training video. Again, thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to your questions afterwards.
Good morning. I'm Jan Getson, one of the water samplers for the MLA, and along with my cohorts, Chris Craig and Eleanor Lewis, we're going to be taking you on a step-by-step guide of what you'll do when you get out in the boat to water sample. First of all, let's start with the kit. Each team will be given one of the kits, and each water sampler will have their own copy of the manual. I've taken my manual apart just to show you what's in it. First is the calendar of dates that we sample. Then we have the quick reference guide which is the step-by-step reference for what you'll be doing, and that is what we're following in this presentation. For a better understanding, complete understanding of our monitoring program, you also have a detailed volunteer manual. Both of these should be read before you go out on the boat. In addition, each kit will have a map that is specific to their testing area, and it shows all of the testing sites. In addition, there will be a description of each one of the sites, which will has both photographic references as well as GPS. Then you have your data sheet that you will record and turn into your team leader for each testing period. Being familiar with this material, I'm getting myself ready to go out to test. I've started by filling in my data sheet with date, train sampler name, rainfall in the past hour, all of the information that I can do at home so that I'm not trying to write in the boat. Then I've assembled my equipment. This is the Secchi dish that we will be demonstrating later, which we use to measure clarity. You have a thermometer, a Sharpie. This is our sample bottle or our collection bottle. Filter and funnel. And the sample bottles. The important thing to notice about the sample bottles is each one is labeled, pre-labeled with the site, but you will need to write the date and on the back of each bottle each time you go out. For our first period, our first testing period, you will need 2 bottles per site, because for our first one we do duplicate samples. The other thing that I have here is a cooler and ice, a bag with ice in it, because we do need to keep our samples cool until they get to our team leader. Before we go out, of course, we will coordinate with the team leader to make sure that everything is going to be assembled. That's particularly crucial for bacteria sampling. We've arrived at our deep water site. We're just checking the coordinates with the coordinates on our chart, and we're fine, ready to go. Step 1, put the thermometer in. Next step is to check for the clarity, and we do that using the Secchi dish, taking it down until we can't distinguish between the white and the black. I'm standing on the shady side of the boat for both the thermometer and for the Secchi dish, and make sure that the sunglasses were left behind. Okay, now I can record the down depth. Now I'm bringing it up, and when I first see those again, I will mark it. And we will record using the tags. The meters are marked with the red, and then these orange lines are 1/10 of a meter. collect a water sample from this same depth. This is the sample, the collection bottle, and we attach it to the Secchi dish using elastics. Easier without a mask. However, there we go. Now the goal of this is to collect water at our water sample at the deep depth. So we're lowering it down.
Trying to get a continuous sample from the surface
Yeah.
down to the depth.
Exactly. And it's going down to the depth between the two markers that we've marked before. And we'll wait to make sure it's filled. Carefully bring it up. Now, before we can use the water, we need to take the funnel and the filter, assemble them. We're going to rinse the filters. I have not got that tightly across. Rinse it once, rinse it twice, check, this is my deep water, that the bottle is 0. We do not rinse the bottle. We rinse the filter. Shoulder. Be very careful that you're not getting your fingers inside the cap or inside the bottle. Now, this is our first go of the season, so we are collecting duplicates. So I have a second bottle with my 0 label. Don't need to rinse the filter again because it's the same site. Now they go into the cooler to stay cool until they are delivered, able to deliver them to my team leader.
So I've just arrived at my nearshore site and I'm going to rinse my sample bottle before I take the real sample. twice. Now I'm going to take the real sample and I'm going to go down and across and up. Okay, I've now got my near-shore sample. Use this sample water to rinse my filter. Now I'm going to pour this into.
You rinsed it twice? And again, we check the label. This is the right bottle for the site.
And it's filled up to the shoulder.
And add it to the cooler.
The bacteria samples have been collected and must be plated within 24 hours. And you must ensure that the incubator has reached 37 Celsius. Label the collie plate with the same location number that is on the jar lid using the wax pencil. All these instructions are very clearly laid out in the binder. You will now open the jar and then remove the lid from the collie plate. Being very careful not to touch any interior surfaces. Pour the water row by row into the collie plate, filling all the little wells that are there. And you have to check it to make sure. If you hold it on an angle, you'll be able to see if you missed some of those wells, which I have missed a couple right here. Okay, so these wells look all to be full. No, there's another one here. So once the wells are full, you just tap it, little tap, holding it on an angle, and then taking a paper towel or tissue, you just absorb the rest of the water that is just sitting on the edge. Once this is completed and your wells are all full, then you replace the lid, being careful not to touch the inside. And it's ready for the incubator. Your next step is to take the collie plate lid and put blank on it. Follow the same procedure using the distilled water provided to you and fill all of the wells. Once all the wells are full, again, check them.
No.
This is your control. Check the wells. Tap it. And absorb the water that's hanging off the edge with a paper towel or a tissue. Once you're sure that all the wells are full, replace the lid carefully, and it's ready for the incubator as well. You only need one blank, even if you're doing several samples. So the next step is in 24 to 26 hours, we will return to read the bacteria or E. coli levels. You've now incubated your sample for 24 to 26 hours. And so we have the sample, and lift off the lid and check for blue cells. Now there are a number of blue cells here, so it's much easier if you have it on a white sheet of paper and you count those blue cells and you mark the number of blue cells corresponding on that tally sheet. And in the end, it makes it much easier to calculate how many blue cells that you've seen. So say in row 12, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you just check those off. This one, this one, this one, and so forth. And then you take your blank and you look at the blank and see if there are any blue cells there. We do not find any blue cells in the blank, which is a good thing. And that means nothing has been contaminated in your session. Now move the collie plate onto a dark sheet of paper, and you have your UV light, and now you're going to be looking at the fluorescent cells. So you have a number of fluorescent cells here. As you can see, don't mistake the little blue things for the fluorescing ones. Take the number, you can chart that number on the tally sheet again. And if you find you have more than 18, it's a good idea to notify the MLA office so they can follow up with whatever might be necessary. After you finish this, you transfer all of the information from the tally sheet onto the data sheet in the blue column and in the fluorescent blue column. Both of those sheets should be returned to the MLA office.
So we'll now move on to our question and answer session. Before we get into that too far, there's an additional piece of information for the collie plate testing, is that we need to, when we count fluorescent cells, they have to be ones that were previously counted as blue. So when we're recording fluorescent cells, they're actually blue and fluorescent for the count on your report. We have a question on how we get our duplicate samples. And the question is, when duplicate samples are required on the first day, can they be taken from the same draw? And the answer is yes. We fill 2 brown sample bottles from one draw with the collection bottle. So you sequentially fill 2 brown bottles with the same sample that we took from the lake. And what that does then is it gives us a double check on the not the lake water, but the work that's done by the lab. And we should be getting pretty close agreement between the test on sample bottle 1 and sample bottle 2, because the only thing that's different is the work that's being done in the lab. So it gives us a check on the accuracy of the work. Does each sampler get a kit? or is there only one per team? There is one per team. A team is doing an area, and an area may have one sampling site, or it may have 6 or 8. But one kit is there for the team and for the area, and should contain all the sample bottles necessary for that area for the summer. And when you get to pick up your kit, which will not be for a couple of weeks because we're waiting for the COVID restrictions to be lifted, we'll ask you to check the number of bottles and so on to make sure that you have enough for the summer and enough to match with the inventory sheet that's in your kit. Our phosphorus samples duplicates at all sampling events, and the answer, Esther, is generally no, unless you wish it to be. We generally just do the sampling duplicates on the first set of samples for the year. How do you get only the deep water sample without filling up on the way down? We are trying to get a continuous sample of the water column from the surface to Seki depth. We're trying to only sample at the depth. We're trying to sample uniformly from the surface to the Seki depth. So in the example I was talking about, if your Seki depth is 2 meters and it takes 12 seconds to fill the bottle, then you should lower it uniformly from the surface to the 2 meter depth over a period of 12 seconds in order to get a continuous sample of the water column. Now, if your Seki depth is shallower, your lowering rate will be slower, and your Seki depth is deeper, your lowering rate will be faster. And you're going to have to do a little test yourself to kind of prepare before you do the real sample. I have a question here that says the Brackenry kit didn't include the quick guide or some of the other paperwork, and we're going to have to just let the office know, and we'll make arrangements to get you the missing pieces. Thank you for letting us know. Oh, Christine, please go ahead.
Sorry, Chris. I was having difficulties there. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. The quick manual, volunteer manual.
Please go ahead.
Sorry. The quick manual, the volunteer manual, and the team lead manual will be online only this year because we're trying to conserve paper.
Are there more questions? Uh, Christine, are those things online now?
Yes, they are. I sent a link in the email that was sent out on Thursday for the reminder. It has all three will be there, and the webinar will be posted there once we're done today. So all those tools will be there. I will also be sending an email out with the webinar link. So you'll have the link to that page for everything.
Okay, so you should have a link now or be getting one after this webinar that enables you to get the documents and the recording of the webinar. Not every site has E. coli tests. So only if you have bacteria tests at your site and you are the team lead, will there be cold plates in your kit. It happens in that some areas are grouped together under a team lead that will collect the bacteria sample jars from several areas, and that team lead will be the one that has the incubator, has the black light, and has the collie plates to do the lab work. So it won't be collie plates in every kit. The first sampling until the 2nd of June. So we will not be providing time, and our intent is to have the first sampling in the following weekend, which would be June 5th to 7th. And our samples to the plan going forward for sampling, and then we hope we can settle into our regular monthly sampling, which would be towards the end of June, towards the end of July, and towards the end of August. And those dates are in your kit. We're going to change our dates back and forth to try and keep up with the COVID protocols in the province. But our best information is what you have right now. To the best of our understanding, the restrictions on getting your boat launched or being able to go out on the lake were lifted this past week. the office should be able to open for pickup and delivery around the 2nd of June, so that you can get your kit and familiarize yourself with it ahead of the first sampling weekend, which will be June the 5th. I'm hoping no further changes. If there are, we'll let you know, but we hope that this is now a pretty much set program. I'm not seeing any further questions, but if something occurs to you, please email them to Christy, get them answered for you. Thank you all very much for coming and attending, and for keeping our program going this year, despite all the challenges that we have. And we're going to wish you, and unless some of the other panelists have comments, we're going to sign off at this point.